7:02.
The Midday Report with Mandy Wiener.
Live, online,
The 702 app, DSTV channel 856.
92.7 and 106 FM.
On the show today, we mark 1 year of lockdown on the Midday Report today by interrogating the impact of the lockdown on our rights and our liberties. We'll bring you a moving interview from Alexandra with the brother-in-law of Collins Khoza, who died after a beating from law enforcement. We'll speak to criminologist Dr. Guy Lamb about our eroding trust relationship with the police, and Justice Edwin Cameron talks to us about whether we waged a war on the people of South Africa in order to enforce the lockdown. All of that over the next hour.
702.
Let's walk the talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the show, a special edition of the Midday Report today. As a station, we have been commemorating a year of lockdown in South Africa. It's also been a year of living in a national state of disaster. So here on the Midday Report, we are taking a look at the impact of the pandemic and the associated lockdown on our civil liberties and our rights. The state of disaster was just extended for yet another month, taking us to mid-April. It was originally set to lapse in mid-June last year, but has been prolonged monthly since then. In a parliamentary debate on human rights this past week, opposition MPs accused the ANC of human rights violations. The rampant PPE corruption, the harshness of the lockdown regulations, police shootings, fears that the vaccine rollout will be a disaster. These were all examples of these transgressions of our human rights. The global pandemic has shown how precarious human rights are, how important it is to ensure that checks and balances on government power are maintained. Civil rights were found to have deteriorated in almost every country in the world during COVID-19. A number of governments have used the pandemic as an excuse to curtail rights, such as free speech, peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. And South Africa's lockdown was arguably one of the toughest in the world. It's been described in some quarters as draconian and harsh. And it's also for this reason that we saw a flurry of court challenges as companies, civic rights groups, and individuals sought to pursue justice through the legal system. The gripe of many has been the apparent inconsistency in enforcing the lockdown restrictions and the irrationality of some of the laws. Some of them have just seemed to be so arbitrary. And the death of 40-year-old Alexandra man Collins Khoza is just one of a number of cases being investigated now. He was drinking a beer while sitting on his stoop when he was clapped around by law enforcement authorities. A post-mortem found that he had died of blunt force trauma to his head. So yesterday, we went to Collins' home in Alexandra. We met with Thabiso Muvhango, Collins' brother-in-law, who was also beaten by soldiers and metro cops. It's a two-part interview. It's quite long, but definitely worth listening to. And to set the scene, it's in an area of Alex in East Bank. Houses are brick and mortar. It's down a dead-end cul-de-sac, and Collins lived in a small building surrounded by other similar brick buildings. On the streets outside, kids are playing hopscotch. One's building a wooden go-kart. There's washing hanging on a wall, a neighbor's walking around in her pajamas, and it's calm as Thabiso Muvhango starts telling me about the events of April 10 last year. So we're in Alexandra. What is this area of Alexandra called?
Extension 8, Far East Bank.
So at the moment we are inside a yard, which is at the end of a dead-end street that comes off one of the main roads. There are some children playing outside, and we're standing in the yard of Collins Khoza's home. So if you can explain to me, where exactly did Collins live and who else lives here?
Collins lives in the big house. There are tenants, obviously. More than, I think, 5 families are here. So, yeah, that's precisely where he lives.
Okay. And we're in this yard over here. There's a gate that closes. This gate is new. This gate wasn't here before when the incident occurred.
The gate is very new. So one of the Good Samaritans donated this gate and the wall for just our protection. So it's very new.
So take me back to the day that the incident occurred. Were you here and what was happening?
Okay. On the day of the incident, myself, I was here. Collins was here. We were actually having a what I can call because it was myself, my wife, his wife, and him. Just a small gathering. Remember, it was on a Good Friday. So earlier on during the day, he was sitting around here where we were standing. So when the soldiers arrived, there was no one outside. It was only brought to our attention by a certain lady, our neighbor, who said to us, there are soldiers outside. That's when we said to her, I want to see for myself. I've never seen soldiers in this area. So as I went out, a lady approached. She was coming from that side.
And you're pointing up the road now?
Yes, it's
outside your yard?
This is a driveway. So it's a dead end, as you can see. So she was approaching from that direction. So obviously I was with my neighbor, the one who alerted us that the soldiers were there. So as we approached the gate, she saw an unattended camp chair. Unfortunately, it had alcohol. So that is when she realized these guys, maybe they were drinking. She approached me. She said to me...
The soldier approached you?
Yes. She approached me. She said to me, have you been drinking? To which I said, yes, we've been drinking. But you know, the president said you must not drink. To which I said to her, no. The president never said people must not drink. People are allowed to do consumption as long as they're in their yards, of which this is what is happening. I tried to explain to her, am I holding in alcohol? She said, no, but you've been drinking, and it's wrong. That is where everything started. So she said to me, I want, if you have alcohol in your house, I want alcohol. We went into the house. There was one beer, one. She took that, then she forced us to, we even went to the other house. She collected another beer. That is when Collins was found.
So where was Collins at the time?
He was at there's another house at the back.
And you're pointing inside this cluster of houses towards the back, so nowhere near the road?
Nowhere near the road. We were not even next to the road when they came. So that is when she said, I want alcohol, the alcohol that you have. So as I proceeded to give her the alcohol, she was like, you think you're smart. How is it that you're giving me a different beer? Because the beer that is there is not the same as this one. So that is when Collins approached and said, sister, I'm the one who was drinking that one. His is this one, not... Then she said to him, we want your alcohol also. She took the 2 beers. She said to us, we must go to the streets. So that is when our wives were trying to negotiate. Guys, how is it that you guys can say you want these guys to go to the street? The alcohol that you took now is from the fridge. Did you find these guys in the streets? No. But why are you saying you must take them to the street? That's when she said to us, you guys, I think you're very smart. Today we're going to teach you a lesson. I'm going to call backup. As she was busy calling for backup, I remember I told her, if you call for this backup, when they come here, they will have a wrong impression about what is happening now. Look, you took beers from our fridge. We are now standing on the streets. When they come here, they will think you got us in the streets, and of which it is wrong. Said, just wait there. She called them. I think it was after 5 minutes they arrived. It was a convoy. It consisted of the JMPD and the SNDF. I can remember I was standing here.
And we're walking out of your yard now, yes, onto the street, this dead-end street, where the kids are playing here and on the road. Hi guys, hello. Hello. Hi.
The convoy stopped there. I could see them when they approached us. She was standing somewhere there. Then they came straight to her. She briefed them. I don't know what she said to them. My brother-in-law was standing there. It is now my understanding that whatever she said, she obviously told them, I don't know what, but in such a way that when they divided themselves amongst us, it was 4
With him,
with my brother-in-law.
with Collins.
Yes, it was here. To me, initially, one guy came. He said to us, the sister thinks you guys are too smart for her. We'll teach you a lesson. I was like trying to explain to him, hey brother, whatever situation you're seeing now, it's not as it is. We were sitting in the house. I tried to tell him the whole story, but he never listened to me. That's when he started slapping me. I in my life, I'm someone who avoids fights by all means. I've never been slapped like that in my life. Never in my life. So he slapped me in such a way that I even lost like vision. Yeah, let's put it like that way, because he would slap me in such a way that I could not see anymore, but I know what is happening. But I could see the guys were attacking my brother-in-law. It was not good. It was not good, I don't know why. And to make it worse, we were not fighting anyone. We were not fighting anyone. So for me, it came to a point where I said to this guy, by then there were 2. I said to him, honestly speaking now, no, this is too much. If you guys, you are saying I've contravened any regulation, please arrest me. If that is the case. The guy agreed. So he pushed me towards the JMPD Quantum, or I forgot the name of the car. As I approached there, they asked me, brother, what is the problem? I explained to them, guys, this is what happened. I told them the story. They were like, but now, let's say we're arresting you now. What charges are we going to bring against you? I'm like, I don't know, but I cannot be assaulted like this. I haven't done anything wrong. They were busy assaulting my brother-in-law by that time. So those guys, the MPD guys, they said to me, no. You know, the only thing that you guys did wrong was to argue with soldiers. You're not supposed to argue with them. But I was like, soldiers are not above the law. We were not wrong, we're within our rights. So we are saying now, if we have contravened any regulation, arrest us. Those guys advised me, they said, okay, it's fine. We cannot arrest you because you haven't done anything wrong. Do me a favor. Go back to the yard, don't talk to them. I said, okay, it's fine. So as I approached the yard, those SNDF members, the 2 guys who were assaulting me, I think they were surprised what is happening now. So the other one took the beer that was there by the streets. He opened it. He poured it over my head. The rest he put on my private parts. The same they did to my brother-in-law. So as we went in, after everything, they poured the alcohol to me, and he was slapping me again. I was telling him, arrest me, guys, if I've contravened any regulation. So as we went in, that's when I realized those 2 ladies who initially approached us, they were now inside the yard, having an argument with the ladies. By that time, my wife was 6 or 7 months pregnant. I don't remember quite well. And my brother-in-law's partner, she was from work. So those guys were not even drunk. We were not drunk ourselves because we remember everything. As we approached, those ladies now they wanted to assault our wives. So that's when the attention turned to my brother-in-law's partner. Do you know those ladies? They whipped her with a shambok on the face. But she never reacted. She was standing still. And she was bleeding. That's when I think my brother-in-law came in. So he was like, guys, but why are you assaulting my wife? She never did anything wrong. Why is it that you're assaulting her? That's when 2 of the SNDF members, they took him inside the house where we were sitting right now. What happened? We don't know. but we could hear bangs, like walls, somebody being banged against against the wall. We don't know what happened until this day. He went into the house. He was vomiting. It was only later that his partner realized there's something wrong. They came and called me. When I went into the house, he was actually sleeping on the floor. As I approached, I knew something was definitely wrong, because his eyes were looking one side and his hands were, you could see there's something wrong. So I tried to feel for the pulse, nothing. But as I felt his hands, I could feel they were very cold. We called for an ambulance. It arrived, I think, 45 minutes later. 911. It was an old white guy. He moved the machine across his heart. Then he said, there's no movement here. This guy has been gone for a while now. So, and little did we know that there were neighbors taking the whole thing on their phones. And little did we know that they were also taken away. We knew that the following day. So they were taken away only to be dropped off, I think it is Linksfield off-ramp. Their phones were thrown into the bush.
Because they had filmed the whole thing?
They were filming everything. Those who tried to, they were intimidated actually. So the footages were deleted. So
how do you feel now, thinking back on what happened, that the police and the soldiers that were supposed to be protecting you did this to you?
Honestly speaking, I'm very disappointed. To be honest with you, it was unnecessary for them to use force. Let's say, for argument's sake, we were drunk, we were naked on the street. Did we deserve to be attacked like the way they did? No. If anyone contravenes any regulations, the law states, arrest that person. Why were we not arrested? Why? We were not fighting anyone. It was unnecessary. Their actions directly led to his death, which was unnecessary. He had kids, a mother to look after, a partner. Who's going to look after those people? Their actions were reckless, I'm telling you. Until this day, I'm angry. I don't want to lie to you. It was unnecessary for them to use force. Force, you can use it if you want to arrest, if somebody is not complying. But with us, we were saying to them, arrest us. They never did that.
Do you think that as a family you will ever get justice for what happened to Collins?
We've got a very strong legal team. We believe one day, even if it might be delayed, one day justice will be served. That we believe. Our lawyers now are currently busy with, they're negotiating with the Minister of Defense. I strongly believe that one day justice will be served. It was unnecessary for them to use force. I don't want to lie to you. It was unnecessary.
And what lessons can we learn from what happened about our relationship with the police and our relationship with soldiers and law enforcement?
It is quite clear that our police, let's say law enforcement, they need more training. If they cannot relate with the community, how then can you assist them? My son now does not want even to see a soldier. I tell him every day, not all soldiers are the same. Those ones are just a small part. They are not all soldiers. But really, there must be something done about this. We need to, if it's training, I don't know, but they need to relate better with the community. You cannot be using force where it is unnecessary. Use force where it is necessary. My plea is to the president himself. He needs to deal with issues like this in time. Our country is becoming desensitized to violence. Any country that does that, one day, I'm telling you, there's going to be trouble. We need to correct that now. Oh, Collins had kids. My brother-in-law had kids. How do you think those kids think about the current situation? We have a lot of people, a list is endless, who succumb to the attacks from our law enforcement. What about their families? Do you think they are happy? People are angry. It will only, I'm telling you, it will happen if it's not corrected. So it is up to our leaders. They need to solve this, and they need to do it in time. You see, these kids who are sitting here, they were there, they witnessed everything. What psychological impact do you think that events has done to them? Our country is a very violent country. So what country are we trying to create? We need to fix this, and we fix it in time.
The voice there of Tabiso Muvango, the brother-in-law of Collins Khoza. So moving, and sure, that interview and that experience of going to see him in Alexandra yesterday, it really does evoke so much emotion. Lots of WhatsApps coming through as well.
Good afternoon, Mandy. Listening to this story, I am ashamed to call myself a South African.
Hi, Mandy. When this guy is explaining, it's like he's explaining a scene from the days of the apartheid when soldiers used to assault people. That's all I could see in my mind.
Hi, Mandy. I'm heartbroken. My heart is just low. Just listening and reliving that experience from when I first heard of this last year and hearing it again, to believe that human beings can treat one another like this. Worst of all, the human beings that are mandated to protect and save us, and they will do this. My heart is so broken. My heart goes out to the family, and I hope they get justice. This is the ANC.
So much response coming into that interview with Collins Khoza's brother-in-law, so please keep sending those WhatsApp voice notes. And on the show today, we are looking at the impact of the lockdown on our rights and our liberties. And a lot of this has to do with our relationship with the police and what has happened over the past year. In an answer to a parliamentary question recently, Minister Bheki Cele confirmed that as of the middle of February this year, 401,850 people had been arrested for contravening state of disaster regulations. In the first 40 days of the lockdown, there were 589 complaints of assault filed against the police with IPID, and 32 South Africans have died. Welcome to the show now, Brigadier Vish Naidoo, the police spokesperson. Brigadier Naidoo, thank you very much for being available and for coming on the show today. Was it a mammoth task for the police enforcing these regulations, and what was the approach of police in doing so?
A very good afternoon to you, Mandy, and thank you for this opportunity. I think a year ago, when the COVID-19 virus reached our shores, we all entered into uncharted territory. I think the entire world actually entered into uncharted territory in dealing with this virus, and we're still trying to deal with this virus. Albeit, I think South Africa, we're in a much better position now in terms of infection rate than, for example, the European countries in the Western world. But that being said, the South African Police Service was mandated to lead in trying to contain this virus. When I say mandated to lead, we were not the only department responsible for containing the virus. From a security point of view or law enforcement point of view, we worked very closely with the South African National Defence Force. We worked very closely with the various metro departments, the national traffic departments as well. And remember, there was a significant restriction of movement of people, particularly during the level 5 and level 4 lockdown period. And as law enforcement, we had to ensure that people had to abide by the Disaster Management Act regulations so as to enable us to contain the spread of the virus. And yes, in doing so, we arrested quite a significant number of people for contravention of these regulations, but also in the process, the law enforcement officers, not necessarily police alone, but the law enforcement officers were accused of violating individuals' human rights, and in some cases, people have lost their lives during this enforcement process. Of course, which I'm not saying had to be condoned, because we were trying to contain a devastating virus.
Brigadier, are you concerned as the SAPS that the last year may have impacted or eroded the relationship of trust with the police, which was already relatively fragile?
Well, actually not. If you are referring to our approach in containing the virus, remember these incidents I'm referring to were sporadic. They happened across a period of 1 year. But if you look at where we have brought South Africa now in terms of containing the virus, I think the feelings are mixed, with the majority having applauded the security forces for the work that they've done. I mean, with us as the South African Police Service alone, we have lost just under 600 members to the virus, and tens of thousands of our members, being in the front line that they were infected by the virus as well, with the risk of actually losing their lives. But almost 597 to be precise. 2 days ago, we had a total figure of 597 members that have lost their lives to the virus. So all in all, I think the greater majority of the people have applauded the work that have been done by the police. But we as an organization, we would have hoped to have seen a much better approach with lesser allegations of infringements by the law enforcement officers. But we were dealing with a devastating virus, and I think it was a job well done by the police officers.
Brigadier, there's been a lot of criticism of the difference, and Bheki Cele himself has said that it's becoming increasingly more difficult to defend against the argument that the police deal with black protesters differently to how they deal with white protesters. An example of this is how the SASA grant recipients were dealt with in Cape Town, and then the polite herding of protesters during beach protests. Are there lessons here for the SAPS from the past year about how you've dealt with all of this?
Well, Mandy, I think the lessons have emerged from 2016 with the incidents at Marikana, and I think with the Farlam Commission recommendations, which of course the minister is going to be releasing at the end of the month, the responses to the recommendations he's going to be releasing at the end of the month. But I must say that if you look in the context of the number of protests that we've had over the years, or over the past year, for example, in that context, if you look at the number of incidents of alleged police brutality, that too, I must say, were sporadic. But these members, every single one of our members, they know that they must conduct themselves within the confines of our code of conduct, within the confines of the law. And any member who exceeds the boundary of the law will have to account for their actions, or omissions for that matter, as well. And like we've seen now with the incident in Braamfontein, where the bystander was shot and killed, 4 members are in the dock for that. So it's not like if members exceed the boundary of the law, their actions are going to go unpunished. They will have to account at some point, and all our members know that. And members who act in that fashion are not acting in accordance with our policies, our prescripts, and our standard operational procedures. They are definitely acting on their own accord, and they will have to be called to account for that.
Brigadier Vish Naidoo, police spokesperson, thank you very much for your time. Let's speak now to Dr. Guy Lamb. He's a criminologist in the Department of Political Science at Stellenbosch University, and he's also written about this extensively. Dr. Guy Lamb, thank you very much for your time today. You've said that government's primary lockdown compliance strategy was asserting the authority of the state. It was a policy choice to use militarized force to address a public health issue.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Mandy. Good afternoon, listeners. I kind of listened to the SAPS spokesman, Vish Naidoo's comments, and I mean, I think they really are in order. But I think the kind of important point here is around what happened a year ago, is that we're faced with this global pandemic. We've seen that at that particular point in time, we knew it was going to have serious consequences for South Africa, and government made the decision to go into hard lockdown. But the point here is that it required the police to do that, and the police were not really equipped to pursue a public health issue, but yet they were the best available resource to do that. And what happens there is they use tried and tested strategies to bring about compliance. So they've typically been using militarized approaches to deal with crime, fighting a war on crime as it's been defined, and used it to apply to a public health issue. And it was very much around trying to get South Africans to behave in a particular way. And it was using tried and trusted, established mechanisms to do that. So that's really what we were faced with at the beginning of lockdown, and certainly the consequences we've seen following from that in terms of abuses by police, abuses by military, abuses by law enforcement officials within the Metro Police Departments.
And when we look back over the past year and we interrogate whether this clampdown by authorities was necessary, to what extent the jackbooted behaviour undermined our civil liberties or infringed our rights, what lessons are there to take from it?
Well, I mean, the one thing, it's a point that you've actually mentioned previously when you were playing the interview from Collins Khoza's brother-in-law, Tapisa Muvhango. I mean, sort of your comments about trust in the police, also your question to Brigadier Naidoo about trust in the police. And the point you've made is trust in the police is quite low. In a stable democracy where relationships, good, respectful relationships exist between citizens and between the police, then generally citizens will trust the police and listen to the police and behave in certain ways. In the case of South Africa, where trust has been eroded over the years, it hasn't been particularly high. We've seen this particularly concentrated poor levels of trust within high crime areas, so poor, under-resourced areas where service delivery is quite poor. We see that relationship quite weak. And if that relationship between the police and the citizenry isn't strong, often the police have to resort to force to try and get compliance. And listening to individual police members, particularly when there were studies going on and they've been interviewed under a sense of anonymity, that their names were not given, a common thread that police kept saying is, residents are not listening to us. And a sort of sense of frustration that then led to the kind of heavy-handed tactics that we've seen about using force, using fear to try and bring about compliance. So it was this whole kind of standard comment was, they're not listening to us, we're trying to save lives, we're doing this for your own good. So that's a kind of a common thread throughout.
Dr. Guy Lamb, thank you so much for that explanation, the analysis. It's really helpful, and I think lots of lessons to learn here as well. Dr. Lamb, a criminologist in the Department of Political Science at Stellenbosch University.
Yeah, I just want to say, my opinion is there should never be an option to kill somebody. If you're a citizen or not a citizen and you're unarmed, police or army or anything, the option to kill should not even be there. It should not be, especially if people are unarmed. It should never, ever be there. So that's my opinion.
Good morning, Mandy. This is a really a horrible story. I wish these people who killed this guy, they could face hard punishment, so that people who are there to protect us, they shouldn't take advantage that they're above the law. Even the police and the soldiers, they should know that they are not above the law. So I wish, these people, they can face hard punishment.
On the Midday Report today, 1 year of lockdown, we are looking at the impact of the lockdown on our rights and our liberties. And in an excellent assessment of this issue published in News 24 earlier this month, Justice Edwin Cameron asks whether we waged a war on the people of South Africa in order to enforce the lockdown. So a great pleasure to welcome Justice Cameron today. Thank you for your time today. You write about how speaking about war and the enemy makes it easier for us to deploy the military, to incarcerate people, to roll back basic rights and infringed, cherished liberties. Is it easier to assault and even kill people through this war talk?
That's the whole point, Mandy, and great to be with you and your listeners. Mandy, the important point here is that we are suffering our democracy's second great pandemic of contagion, of illness, and of death. This is not the first one. The first one was AIDS. Just as we were becoming a democracy, we experienced a wave of HIV infections and a terrible climb in AIDS deaths. And we had a choice. We made many wrong choices in AIDS. The most catastrophic was President Mbeki's choice not to accept the science of AIDS. That is a choice that our current government has not made. And I honor President Ramaphosa and his health minister and the advisors and teams who've done that. But we made a second choice in AIDS, which we disastrously have not followed now. The second choice in AIDS was not to use the big stick. There were people who said, round them up, identify them. There were even people who said, put a tattoo on the inner thigh of every person diagnosed with HIV. We fought that. There were even calls in Parliament for a statute specially criminalizing HIV exposure and transmission. And of course, we've got about 30 African countries, including Zimbabwe, to our north, that have got those terrible statutes. Those statutes try to use the big stick of the criminal law. And we know that it's a terrible mistake in public health issues. The lesson from AIDS from the whole world, one that South Africa on that score embraced, was when you want to advance the public's health, let the public's health advance it and don't try to use it with a big stick. The opposite happened a year ago. We sent in the troops, tens of thousands of troops. We made people do push-ups and squats. We humiliated people. We put them in jail. I went last year on the 3rd of May to visit Sun City, the Johannesburg Correctional Center. We were told that the already overflowing awaiting trial cells had 10% more people in them. So we were cramming our cells with awaiting trial prisoners accused of breach of lockdown rules at precisely the time when we should have been opening our prison doors to let people out at the risk of contagion. So the whole approach was desperately mistaken.
Why do you think it is that we did not take the benevolent human rights approach as we did when we were fighting AIDS, and that we did take this misdirected criminal law approach this time around?
Such a good question, Mandy. And you know, at a human level, it's that we were scared. We didn't know what we were confronting. So we turned to what we thought was our best answer, which was the big stick, skopskieten donder, sluttler, get them and hit them. And a lot of people were hit and a lot of people died, and I mentioned their names. But Mandy, the answer behind that is something that you've written about, which is the criminal process, criminal justice administration. The answer behind that is that our democracy has wrongly chosen the big stick too often. We choose the big stick with drugs, for example. Now, we know that drug use is a public health problem. We know a second fact, this is an incontrovertible fact, that the United States government's war on drugs has inflicted catastrophic damage on South and Central America and on America itself. It's filled up its prisons and jails with people. We must not use the big stick with drugs, but we still do. We still have minimum sentences for drug use. And the consequences are seen in the Cape Flats, where we allow, because of criminalization of drug use, we allow gangsters to flourish. We allow an atmosphere of terror, murder, and intimidation. Portugal has abolished the big stick for drugs, and the results have only been beneficial. So, Mandy, I'm giving a long answer, and you've been very generous as host here, not to interrupt. The long answer is that we have resorted to the big stick on crime, we have resorted to the big stick on drugs, and then we resorted to the big stick also on this public health problem. And in all those cases, it is a grave error. We have to rethink.
Well, Justice Cameron, I wish I had more time as a generous host to speak to you about this, but I do urge people to go and read your analysis about whether or not we waged a war on the people of South Africa and the lessons that we can take from the war on drugs and our fight against HIV/AIDS. But thank you so much for your time. That's Justice Edwin Cameron speaking to us there. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of the Midday Report today, interrogating the impact of the lockdown on our rights and our liberties. And as we mark the 1-year anniversary of the state of disaster, we do need to reflect and assess at what cost the lockdown was enforced. What has held true, as always, is the important contribution of civic society in protecting those rights and liberties and the strength of the courts in upholding the Constitution. And I'm pretty sure that we can expect this issue to continue to draw attention the longer it takes government to properly roll out vaccines to the population. Inevitably, we'll expect court challenges to force equitable access.
702.
More than a radio station.
Let's walk the talk.